Here, I guess every Monday, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm here. And my favorite, how should I say, Tanto? Or the Hopalong Cassidy and the Sundance Kid?
Tanta, I mean, in French, it means aunt.
Tanta,
I'm not your aunt, I'm your uncle.
Okay.
I'll be your uncle, not your tanta.
So anyway, I really like to have Jay Fidell with me. Jay Fidell is obviously the entrepreneur who set this whole project up, the Think Tech Hawaii, and the streaming video, and we are very happy and proud to be here, part of this tremendous effort to bring some of the more esoteric and perhaps some of the news that's not covered by national media or even local media. And what we're going to talk about today is, I'm going to ask Jay a question, Jay. Which funeral home would you like to carry out your arrangements, your final arrangements? Have you selected a funeral home?
No.
Do you have one that perhaps has a catchy name that you'd really like to be associated with for posterity?
No, I'll go on, I don't care.
How about hospitals? Have you ever thought of like your favorite hospital? Where would you like to lie? Perhaps with angina pectoris, or perhaps with you know, a cranial fracture or something like that?
Somewhere close. Queens would be okay.
Queens would be good. Well, you know, I was thinking about the hospitals I've learned to love, and actually I've been a patient in Queens, but we're not going to talk about Queens today because my association with Queens was about the ride to Queens. I was living in Hawaii Kai. I had a kidney stone attack.
Ooh, that's painful.
But you know what's more painful than having a kidney stone attack? Is having it at 8 o'clock in the morning when you live in Hawaii Kai at the Gehaktesveld at the end of the world. And you know what is even worse? What is even worse is to have a roommate, and you know this roommate, so I won't mention his name. It begins with R and ends with K. No, that was a different roommate, I'm sorry. But anyway, this roommate is going to take me to the hospital because we can't wait for the ambulance. And we're in Hawaii County, we want to get to Queens. And it's 8:15 in the morning, and they have the fast lane. But my roommate said, no, it says you have to have 3 people in the car. And
Get another roommate.
So what I remember was that I took my hand almost, and he'd insisted that he doesn't know how to drive my motorcycle, so we took his bug, a small 1962 Beetle. And I'm trying to grab the metal roof with my arm outside the window in such pain, trying to just open it up just like a tuna can. So, and it kind of lasted a long time. It was like an hour and 10 minutes before we got to Queens Hospital. I said, get a car, pull a cop over, scream, get me a motorcycle escort, something. No, because he was like a yeke. Yeke means a German Jew, is very pedantic and goes just by the rules. And if you learned anything about me from the show, or you will learn, I don't play by the rules. I have no rules. Everything is associative. Everything is if I'm talking to my hidden psychiatrist, which I've never had. So obviously I've been really amiss and remiss and so on. So anyway, so I'll be talking.
I hope I'm not playing that role.
No, not at all, not at all, not at all. I can't afford you, Jay. You know,
No,
being an attorney, I could never afford your rates for listening to clients. Yeah, what a bummer. Anyway, so this was why we won't talk about the local hospital. We also don't want to put in jeopardy future sponsors, perhaps, of this very show. So I don't want to talk, how you say, to talk nasty, or to talk.
Well, I happen to like Queens, but
No, I won't say anything about it.
You hear that? I like Queens.
Because what we're going to talk about today is the sides of hospitals you didn't see if you live in Hawaii. And so we're going to start, first of all, with the first hospital that I learned to love, and that is Montefiore Hospital and Medical Center in the Bronx. That was one of my, actually it was the second job I had in healthcare. The first job I had in healthcare was helping my parents run a small 50-bed nursing home in New York City that they had bought. Yes. Yeah. So my second job was at Montefiore Hospital.
Why? What is it that you love about it?
I had been. See,
I'll tell you how I ended.
A hospital. So
It's
what
hard to
happened
love a
was,
hospital.
what happened was, I had been a teacher before to stay out of the draft and not go to Vietnam on an educational day, and I had to teach math, which I had no clue about at the time. So obviously, eventually, the students figured this out. So I wasn't too successful as a math teacher, avoiding the Vietnam War. So, but I had to get another job that was critical to the national defense. And teaching in a hospital turned out to be exactly the
Sounds
ticket.
right.
So I became the director of paramedical education at Montefiore Hospital and Medical Center in the Bronx. Some of you may know the hospital by its association with the Albert Einstein School of Medicine of Yeshiva University, also in New York. Very famous research hospital. But my job there was to set up a paramedical training program, actually with funds that were readily available by something we just celebrated very recently. It's the War on Poverty. So this was the first campaign of the War on Poverty that reached the Bronx medical empire.
To make jobs.
To make jobs, exactly. And solve several problems that President Johnson thought would be a great boon to society, promote equality, promote good health care, in fact, to masses. And at the forefront of this was a concept called social medicine. Now, this is not a concept that's espoused too much anymore, but at that time, Martin Cherkassky, who was the president of Montefiore Hospital, had a vision. And he said to me, because my parents' nursing home would have an agreement with Montefiore Hospital to channel patients who got very ill at the nursing home, needed acute care, to Montefiore Hospital, which was only about 4 miles away. So they had agreement. So I won't say that we had influence on Martin Cherkassky, or because, I mean, it started out as a 1,200-bed hospital. We were talking about a serious place. But apparently someone whispered in his ear that I knew something about teaching, and I was just the person with the right social values. I had already a trail in the marches on Washington with Martin Luther King and some of the other civil rights activities when I came to America. I guess when you come from the Middle East, you become so combative that you're just looking perhaps for the next social event in the streets. Nah, I shouldn't have said. Nah, it wasn't really that. But it was, you know, going to a Woolworth's counter, I guess, and getting beaten by the cops as you're trying to integrate so that Afro-Americans and white people could eat at the same lunch counter was a big deal. But apparently for some people. But we won that war, and then I started my war on poverty at Montefiore Hospital. And Martin Cherkassky
What is social medicine?
Good question. Social medicine is that the medical institutions of society should be at the service of all the community in terms of giving, providing health care, preventive health care, maternity care, child and mother care, care for the aged in society. All the hospital would be the focal point of all these services, the social services, and so on. Does that sound familiar? Sounds like something we were just talking about for the last 4 years, doesn't it?
You know, I remember in those days, because I was there too, not that hospital, but that there was a huge, strong influence of social work as a profession. And City College had a huge social work program. And it was a fine profession, not like now. Now it's more an administrative thing. Now, I mean, in those days, you could really help people as a social worker. Sounds like these two things are related.
Yeah, actually, the movement, Martin Cherkassky can't claim the whole credit, because actually he hired someone to be his director of social medicine. The name was Victor Seidel. Victor Seidel was really the father of social medicine.
No relation.
Not Fidell,
no.
Seidel.
Yeah, I heard.
Oh, okay. and so it was. So he hired me to set up a program, and his vision was very interesting. He said, we have a lot of Puerto Ricans and a lot of Afro Americans who are working in a hospital in menial jobs, you know, cleaning and nurses' aides and serving food and everything else, wheeling patients around. He says, I want you to come up with a plan that we can educate all these people to actually get to the level of going to medical school and becoming brain surgeons. He said, I want to see examples or a system in place that within 12 years, someone who doesn't speak English today, who's perhaps wheeling around a laundry truck or laundry cart, will be actually graduating from medical school and specializing in a field that they have no access to today. And so that was he said, that's the plan. So
Visionary man.
Very visionary man. We came up with also our first project was that many of these people didn't speak English. So we bought used school buses, we set them up as language laboratory, and we gave free courses in English and mathematics so they could get their GED diplomas, all these employees free, gratis. The only thing is they had to come after work or during their lunch break, and they sat at the, so it was wonderful. We had such great success and such great acceptance in the community. And the hospital was seen all the time as a purveyor of good, community good.
Yeah, and
so,
building careers, that's wonderful. That's a mitzvah.
Yeah, and so this was the concept. So then I also went out and decided to make the plan that at every step, the paraprofessional help, meaning the non-medical, non-nursing staff, except for the nurses' aides, could actually slowly take courses, graduate college with the support of Bronx Community College and the support of City University or City College, and eventually go to medical school.
You know, I thought when you titled this show, 3 Hospitals I Love, I thought you were going to talk about being a patient in those hospitals. You're not talking about that at all, are you?
You are, no, because you're reaching. You see, actually, that's going to be part of it. I wanted my introduction to be almost non-controversial.
Okay.
Okay, so that was my point of departure in the medical care. And I was fortunate. I was actually one of the things that I spent such a long time to avoid the American military was because I was drafted by the Israeli military at the same time. And I didn't really want to go for 6 years nonstop, just changing uniforms like underwear. So I said, no, this is not going to work out. So when I was released from the American military due to certain ailments and so on, and you know, and then, oh, do we have a picture of Montefiore Hospital before I leave Montefiore Hospital? There we go. This is Montefiore Hospital. You can see that. That was before the massive building took place. And that's where I spent my incorrigible youth. And then I was very fortunate. I met a gentleman who was the administrator of a place called the Soroka Medical Center. Today, it was called the Negev Central Hospital, and he was Israeli, and since we spoke a common language, Dr. Cherkasky had sent him to be with me to learn about American healthcare and some of the innovative programs we were doing.
That's great.
While I was there, the gentleman heard that I was immigrating to Israel and said, I have a job for you, you'll be my assistant. Okay, so when we return, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the journey into Israeli medicine, and we will talk again. Jay Fidell, my guest today, my sounding board for all the innovative ideas we plan to present to our audience. Take her away.
Aloha. I'm Hong Jiang, host for Asia in Review on Tuesdays.
And I'm David Day, host for Asian Review on Thursdays. Both of us broadcast our respective shows at 4 p.m.
And my topics tend to deal with questions related to environment, culture, history, and sometimes human rights.
And my shows tend to be on international business, foreign policy, geopolitics, and national security. And you can watch our shows live on the ThinkTech website at thinktechhawaii.com.
And you can also watch us on YouTube or Olalo.
So come join us on Thursdays at 4 p.m. I'm David Day.
And on Tuesdays at 4 p.m., I'm Hong Jiang.
Aloha.
Aloha.
So you're back, as well as us. Jay Fidell is here with me, and we're talking about hospitals I learned to love. So obviously, Montefiore Hospital Medical Center in the Bronx today, a major medical center in New York, was my first introduction to general medicine and to healthcare administration.
What does Montefiore mean, or what place does it
that's a
refer
good question.
Yeah.
Lord Montefiore was a very famous a lord crowned by the British House of Lords, by the Queen, given the honor to be a lord, and he was I believe one of the first, or the first actually, Jewish member of the House of Lords. and he was very wealthy philanthropist, and so the hospital was named after him. He donated to a lot of social projects in the Jewish community in Europe and in the United States.
So it goes back to the 19th century.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. In days like Rockefeller University, Rockefeller Hospital, you can guess the rest, And of course, Boritzer Hospital, where, it's
Coming
not
soon.
Coming soon to a venture capital firm near you. And so that's going. So I get this job offer, and I decide to immigrate to Israel. But because I want to save some money, I send my belongings by ship. And I take my motorcycle, my first BMW, an R50, and travel, send it to London by plane, and decide to journey to Israel on my motorcycle.
Oh, what a trip.
So, and on the way, I had some relatives in Europe who told me that one of my relatives was actually a psychiatrist outside of Zurich in a small village called Wiel. Now, Wiel is a nondescript town, and I should mention that because I should disclose.
Doesn't Wiel mean village?
Yeah.
So it's the village.
Village. But the interesting thing is that just this summer when I was with my wife in Switzerland, we actually passed by there, and I said, "There's a mental hospital." My wife says, "You are all the time, every city we go to, you know where the mental hospital is. What is with you? You didn't tell me about this background. Is it a defective gene? What is with the mental hospital? Do you have emergencies that you're anticipating?"
It's a hobby.
So I couldn't disclose the nature of my previous visit. So I heard that this relative was a psychiatrist, and I take the train out of Zurich for about 40 minutes. This is in the middle of my motorcycle trip, and I go to visit this relative. I had not met her, I just knew her by reputation. And she says, "Oh, let me give you a tour. Why don't you show what a mental hospital looks like? Let's just see a picture of what I saw when I went inside the room." There you see, this is one of the happy patients, because I was not allowed to take pictures inside, but she took me on a tour, and then she took me to a closed ward for me to see the real life of a Swiss mental health facility. And I can only describe it as about 100 people in a large room, many of them half naked, many of them in diapers, nobody with belts, no one with shoes, screaming and pawing, and then my relative says, "Oh, I just got a beep, I have to leave. Stay here, don't walk away." And she locks me with this. This isn't a castle, this is an old castle, right? And she has this big key, and she's carrying. This is a psychiatrist, right? Can you imagine a psychiatrist? You're going, he has a big key, locks the door after you're coming into his couch. You're lying on the couch, he locks it with a big door. She says, "Stay here, I'll be right back." And she locks me from the outside, that I cannot escape, with 100 patients who are all screaming incoherently.
One flew over the cuckoo's nest.
This is prior to many of the medications that we really, learn to accept, diazepam and all kinds of things that calm you down. And I'm locked in it. 40 minutes later, she comes and rescues me. I don't know how I survived those 4 minutes. I never forgot this. And that's why today I keep a registry in my head of mental hospitals.
So is this one of your favorite places?
So this was one of the places I only learned to like from a distance. Okay. And it was one of the reasons why mental health was not one of the areas in which I specialized in, like diabetes or aging or geriatric medicine or so on. So, yeah. So mental health, I'm sorry.
It gives
I
you a reality
apologize.
test.
I should mention this also a caveat. I have a late uncle who was the psychiatrist who evaluated Adolf Eichmann after he was captured in Argentina. He was the head of Israel's largest state hospital, and the court asked that he evaluate whether Eichmann was fit to stand trial for genocide. Now, his conclusion was that Eichmann was culpable and should stand trial. He understood the difference between right and wrong. The old
insanity test. Yeah.
The insanity test. So, but my uncle Rudy, with all due respect, he played the flute. Now, there's nothing wrong with playing the flute for psychiatrists,
could be.
but he would go into the toilet, and play endlessly for hours. All you would hear is flute music out of the toilet.
I've always wondered about psychiatrists when they do things like that.
Yes, so I never, you know, and I remember years later when I came to Israel on a visit, and I was driving my motorcycle into a gas station to fill up, and there was Uncle Rudy filling up at the same gas station. And I said, Uncle Rudy, and he just looked at me kind of blankly, with a kind of look, do I know you? I said, okay, so, you know, things happen. Okay. So
moving right along.
So here we go, and I am arriving in Israel, and my first job is in Beersheba. Now, how many, by a show of hands, how many of you know where Beersheba is? Well, Jay, you're just kind of half sure, but there's the hospital. That's the hospital that actually I was the assistant administrator. After I unpacked, they gave me about 48 hours to unpack, and I was on the job. So my job in this hospital had at the time 320 beds. You can see it wasn't a very big hospital, but it was a very different kind of hospital, because Beersheba is the border of the Negev desert. Southward is all desert until the Gulf of Aqaba, the Gulf of Eilat, which is the beginning towards the Red Sea. And so here I am, and after I meet with my friend who had got me appointed there and so on, we go through all the formalities, and he says, here's your job. You're in charge, first of all, of the underground emergency hospital, because this hospital not only served the civilian population, but also the military population. At that time, Israel controlled the Sinai Desert, which it had conquered from Egypt in the Six-Day War. Now, most of you I know are too young to remember the Six-Day War. Maybe I am too.
I remember it.
I'm trying to forget it, but in any case, we had a lot of incoming people from the Suez Canal. There'd be all kinds of activity, and later on I served on that front when I was in the Israeli military. And what happened was that we'd be getting helicopters landing with cranial trauma and all kinds of really bad injuries, and we were responsible for triaging.
War injuries.
War injuries, right. Even though we were not at war, but on the front there's always a lot of activity. So that was the emergency hospital underground in case there is a total attack on the hospital. There was a complete hospital set up underground.
Wow.
So, and he says, I want you to go at night, because he said sometimes people use that to perhaps kind of, you know, catch and cat nap, you know, some staff sometimes. So, and we couldn't lock it because in an emergency you want everything to be empty, but I'd have to check the supplies. So whenever I was cavernous, and I was the only person with a flashlight, because we didn't turn on the lights just
Too
for
expensive.
Yeah, so, you know, we had budgets. And so I'd take my automatic pistol and I'd walk there with a flashlight, and it's like, it seemed an eternity. So I remember that was one of my less desirable activities. Then he said, you're also in charge of all the clinics. And he said, you, because you speak languages and have been to America and studied in America, you're also responsible for all the communication and public relations activities of the hospital. So I didn't know what that meant. I thought that was, you know, like my picture in television, you know, and talking to the press, and when there's some activity, a new discovery in our labs or something. No, my public relations were this. I was in the administration, that first building you saw in the picture, those were the administrative offices, and I would sit there, and we had visiting hours. But we catered, 1/3 of our patients came from the Bedouin populations, the nomads in the Negev desert. Nomads, you know, camels, you know, the whole story, wearing Arab headdresses, smuggling drugs.
Lawrence of Arabia.
Lawrence of Arabia people. And so when their wives gave birth in some village, maybe 20, 30 kilometers away, 20 miles away, they would walk or take a camel and come to the grounds of the hospital, tie up the camel.
Newborn baby.
No. The women would walk. The men rode the camel. The woman who was pregnant 9 months is walking to give birth, you know, in a sterile environment.
There's a priority thing for you.
It's just, but what happened was, because they didn't have cars, they didn't come on visiting hours to visit their spouses, and they were worried that the women spent too much time just coddling themselves while giving birth. because they had been used to giving birth. You give birth in a tent in the middle of the desert. 3 days later, you're milking the cows, the goats, you know, you're taking care of things. You bring the firewood and so on. And here these women were leaving 3, 4 days when labor pains started. They're coming to the hospital. They're coddling around, you know, mollycoddling, you call it. And they're just having a good time. And they said, hey, something is wrong here. So they'd come and check out what is happening. Are the women cheating on them? Are they not doing enough work or something? And will there be a big bill? And so they go and they come and do it in order in time because they've been traveling on their camel or walking, and then they come and they want to see the wife. We say, well, visiting hours are, you know, between 2 and 5 in the afternoon. But
so they're all going to come see the public relations.
There they go. So what would happen was the guard in front, who's checking also for you know, explosive devices coming through the gate to the hospital, he says, well, who are you? He says, I'm Sheikh Abdul Hassan al-Budabi. And he says, I'm sorry, but what are you here for? To see my wife. She's giving birth. He says, well, you know, the visiting hours. Oh, I got my camel and this, and I got to get back to the other animals and this. And so he says, come back. So these Bedouins were very smart. They had survived 2,000 years in the desert, not because they were stupid, okay, because they learned something. They learn by watching. They don't go to school to learn how to manipulate and how to do things. They learn. In fact, I'll tell you in a minute what the other things they've learned as well. So they would watch and see, and when they would ask me, they said, who is the assistant administrator? Because they would always tell them, go speak to administration if you want, you know. So after a while, I closed the door so they wouldn't, you know, all the time look and look and say, sir, you know. So I said, I closed the door. So they would watch and see, and I told all my assistants or staff, when you want me for something, knock on the door and just say, Rafi, my name. So they watched, so I closed the door. Then they started learning. I hear, Rafi. I said, come on in. And all these Bedouins are coming. It's like, you know, it's every day about 10, 15, and they come and they go, and they kiss your hand, you know, and just, let me in, let me in. I said, you know, so the first time it works. After that, I said to my staff, call me on the interphone, on the telephone when you come to see me. So they had all the, and you know, you can't say no, because when the guy's just not going to leave. He has nowhere to go. I mean, his camel is waiting outside being filled up, you know, filled up. So, okay, we're going to take another break. Continues because so we need to feed the camels while this is going on. Be right back.
We want to thank our underwriters. Hawaiian Electric Company and its affiliates Maui Electric on Maui and Hawaii Electric Light Company on Hawaii Island are deeply committed to the communities they serve. Galen Ho is a senior executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company. The High-Tech Development Corporation, the state's leading technology agency, attached to the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. Castle and Cook Hawaii, with a time-honored legacy that spans more than 160 years and revolves around its mission of investing in Hawaii, creating communities, and providing for the needs of our state. Hawaii Gas, formerly the Gas Company, a proponent of the Liquefied Natural Gas Initiative, helping Hawaii achieve its transition to clean energy and a better energy future. Collateral Analytics, a Hawaii-based tech company empowering the real estate industry with greater and faster access to the tools and data they need to make better informed property investment decisions. I'm Nicole Horry. Thanks so much for joining us on Think Tech.
I'm Maria Kashem. See you next time.
You're back with the dynamic duo. This is Rafi Boritzer, my guest Jake Fidell, and you're back with us. We're talking about the desert, the Negev desert, the Sinai desert, any desert and desert you might want to think about, okay? I spent a lot of time in the Sinai desert. I'm glad I was able to leave eventually, but one thing I want to leave you with this thought is about Beersheba Hospital. We changed it to Soroka Medical Center. Soroka was at the time my boss. He was the head of the Israel HMO, the Kupat Cholim, which actually was the bulwark of Israeli medicine and healthcare till today, and part of the same system of national healthcare, so to speak. Soroka was the leader. I was supposed to be his assistant. things happen. They're subject for other talk shows. The stories are much, much too long. But I will tell you this thing. We did turn that hospital, 320 beds, into a 1,200-bed teaching hospital. And I was involved in building the medical school that went along with it. But that's a whole other story of politics, money, greed, corruption, and healthcare. So we'll get to it. It's another point. There are stories, books about it. It's based on a grant of $7 million that Yale gave to us. It's a whole story. But let's go on. One little story about the Bedouins. I got to leave you with this story because the Bedouins, I served with them in the military. They were my troops. And it's a total different world they live in. They live in a world where they can survive anywhere, without iPhones, without iPads, without water. They know how to survive, and they taught me how to survive under adverse conditions. But what they did was, they had what we call in Yiddish, seichel. Seichel means smarts, brains. And what they did is, they didn't have formal learning. They didn't learn about hedge funds. They didn't know how to invest with Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner Smith, may they rest in peace. But what they did learn was that how to smuggle. Smuggling was their main profession. If you were a Bedouin child, your destiny was to be a professional smuggler, not a run-of-the-mill smuggler trying to evade at Honolulu airport with some bananas and apricots. No, we're talking about smuggling on a big scale. And they knew that at some point, the Sinai Desert, they would go back to the Egyptian control. After the peace agreement between Sadat and Menachem Begin and Jimmy Carter, it all went back. So what they did is they would either buy used Mercedes, old Mercedes, they would steal Mercedes, and they buried them in the desert. And then when we gave control up to the Egyptians in 1979, suddenly they were able to import into Egypt something like 500 Mercedes-Benzes without paying taxes. They became very wealthy through this process. And that shows you how you can smuggle without having to lift a finger, without violating even the law.
The border changes while you watch.
The border changes. And now, this was good, let's say, during World War I, World War II, when borders changed in Europe. But they didn't have the smarts of the Bedouins. Let me go on to the next thing. We were in Beersheba, and next came hospitals that I really learned to love as part of my Asian adventure. And you see, I decided that the Middle East had about all it can handle of me, and I decided to take my motorcycle to Southeast Asia at the invitation of some of my students where I used to teach at HPU. And some of my students said, come and visit us. I didn't know that their parents were kings or princes or sultans and so on. And so I did bring my motorcycle. It landed in Singapore, and I started driving north to Malaysia. The article you just saw was in the front page of the Malaysian News. Professor from Hawaii comes and visits Malaysia and extols the possibility of Malaysia being the next Hawaii. It was a little stretch of the imagination, but that was the journey that I began on. I had a wonderful time. I met the king. He invited me to lunch in Penang at the I think it was the Penang Hotel, or one of the big chain hotels, because they used to have a Thai restaurant. He loved to go on Sunday. This was the former Sultan of Perlis. They rotate their monarchies every 5 years.
Yeah, I remember that.
There are 14 sultans, and they change positions every 5 years. So about every 70 years, each family gets to have a king, you know. Or maybe it was 10 sultans and 2 principal areas. But it doesn't matter. They had a good time. I later was a guest. But what led up to my becoming a guest was very interesting. But after we had lunch, you saw the motorcycle. It was a BMW R100 GS. And the king asked me, what can I do for you after lunch? You know, he was very impressed that I'd taken care of his nephew and they gave him some smarts or whatever. Or he was able to earn a degree or whatever. That was not important. The details are not important. They remain secret and locked on the key. But the point was that after lunch he says, what can I do for you? I said, you know what? You have these 12 outriders riding Kawasaki. And I have a picture, actually, I didn't bring it today, but he was riding an 850 BMW limousine specially constructed for him. And because he was already in his 70s, the seat moved out hydraulically, so he didn't even have to step into the car. He just stood, the seat came up, he sat down, the seat went back in. And I said, what I really want is I want to lead the outriders riding the Kawasaki's with my BMW motorcycle. And he said, of course, but he said, you know, we have security arrangements, so why don't you do this? I'm extending, this was early July, he said, I'm extending to your invitation to come to my birthday. The king's birthday is always, no matter when he's born, is always in September. He says, you come to the palace, we're going to have you lead the parade afterwards through the city with your motorcycle. I said, but I can't bring my motorcycle, you know. He said, no, we'll give you one of the guards' motorcycle, big Kawasaki with lights and everything, we'll rig it all up. So that was my dream. Here I'm invited to the king's birthday, and the next morning I took off. I went to Thailand, but on the way I stopped at a place called Cameron Highlands. Now, you know, Malaysia is very hot and humid country. Southeast Asia is very hot and humid. So what happens is people go to the highlands in the summer. These are the high mountains. There are resorts and gambling casinos.
Cooler.
It's
Drier.
cooler.
Yeah.
The English built all this because they understood that you don't spend the time in Kuala Lumpur, Petaling Jaya, or, you know, the hot areas. You go to the mountains. So why don't we look at the Cameron Highlands so you get the kind of a feeling what the environment I was in, because the next part of the story really talks about hospitals. This is myself, a couple of years younger, on top of Cameron Highlands, and that's where I had a fateful meeting. When I was going with my BMW dirt bike through the mountains, I met a group of people. There was a trail to go the other side down the mountain that was used by insurgents, the Malayan insurgents during the revolt against the British occupation of Southeast Asia. They were still hiding there, but they had become a home for all kinds of insurgents from Asia. They were like training, and I accidentally, by trying to take a back trail off the mountain, bumped into them. We talked, and they said, what do you do? I said, well, you know, I'm involved in healthcare, public health. They said, oh, we have some people here who need your help. Okay, we're going to return about, I know that you're sitting at the edge of your pants because I was when I came back. We'll be
Aloha, I'm Nicole Horry for ThinkTech. For nearly half a century, the Hawaii Foreign Trade Zone No. 9 has brought the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone program to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. DBET, the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism, operates Hawaii's Foreign Trade Zone program to encourage international business and economic development. The Foreign Trade Zone's mission is to increase the amount of international trading activity in Hawaii, thereby providing employment opportunities for the residents of our island state. For more information, see ftz9.org. I'm Nicole Horry. Mahalo.
We're back. You're hot, we're not, but let me tell you the rest of the story. What happened next will have you sitting in your chair, either laughing or crying. So they suggested me this group of insurgents. They introduced me to some people who are from the Karen people from Thailand. And these people were revolting against the government, the military rulers in Burma. And so they said that they have some need, the Karen people, because the Karen people straddled Thailand and Burma on two sides, and they were supportive of each other as a tribe, because things in Asia are a lot more tribal. All these artificial boundaries, like in the Arab world as well, it's more about tribes and countries. And I said I would help them build a public health standard camp, especially as far as sanitation, preventing infections, and preventing all kinds of plagues and so on. So they said, well, listen, it's very dangerous because you can't come in with papers. I said I would come in black without papers on my motorcycle. They told me where to meet my contacts on the border, and they would take me across.
Whoa.
So, and I drove, and I'm driving. I stopped in Pitsanulok, and I stopped in Sukhumvit, all kinds of cities in Thailand along the way. And the next thing I know, I'm waking up in this place, Lampang Hospital, in the emergency room.
What happened?
I don't know. That's the irony. I don't know till this day, except from what the police told me.
What did they tell you?
Apparently, I had gone near the border. Then I did some further investigating many years later and found out that there had been an informant in the group of people who asked me to help them. And they had waited for me to assassinate me. So when I woke up in Lampang Hospital. Lampang is off the border some distance. And the only thing I knew was reports by certain people I met and the police, because the police had asked me to come and sign an affidavit. Till this day I don't know because it was in Thai, but they said I couldn't leave Thailand unless I signed this affidavit. And so what eventually they told me happened was that I'd been shot, and I don't know if you see a little crease mark on the top eyebrow. The bullet did not penetrate my skull. They said you have one of these hard Jewish skulls. It's just impenetrable, hard-headed. And so what happened was I lost control of my motorcycle, even though I was wearing a helmet, and went head-on and got plastered on the radiator of a big truck in the rice paddy.
Oy.
And they apparently left me for dead, because I don't know if you're aware, in Southeast Asia, I don't know if it's all Southeast Asia, but in Thailand certainly, if you injure someone and they don't die, you have to take care of them. But if they die, you pay a few,
expiate your sin.
Yeah, a couple of euros here and there takes care of everything else. This area, apparently there was no police, and there was no law and order, and so there was no one to call. There was also no telephones, no cell phones, no nothing. So I lay in the rice paddy, they said a few hours, until some of the workers coming off the field decided that this would not look good if there were any questions of why this body was laying down in the ground, face down, not moving. And so someone decided in the village to tell the headman got in touch with the police, and they eventually sent a guy on a scooter to see what this was all about, a moped actually. And he came in and he took my pulse, a carotid pulse, and figured I was alive. And then apparently they took me and they ferried me over to the hospital, where I woke up 3 weeks later.
3 weeks later?
Coma,
oh
yes.
My goodness.
And when I woke up, it was very interesting. Talk about a hospital you learn to love. The nurses were there. Then there were also about 12 people with candles chanting.
For you?
Yeah, that I should die.
You should die?
Right, because they were going to have to take care of me for the rest of their life, because I hit their truck, their husband's truck.
Oh, they'd be obligated to take care of you?
So I didn't know all this till much later.
I don't know if you could love that.
And as soon as I wake up, they say, also the police is here. I said, why? Where am I? I said, who am I? Because I had amnesia and didn't know who I was. All I see is these people, and they are praying and chanting. I didn't know at the time they were praying and chanting I should drop dead. And then some of the nurses come, and they want to give me massage. Then I realized that my hand had been crushed. I had 4 vertebrae that were fractured. I had a crushed sternum, and a few other minor injuries.
This is when you hit the truck.
Right, and I also had a skull fracture. So aside from that, I was in pretty good shape, considering every place else. And then I was in a hospital there, and a gentleman comes in after a few days, and he says, my name is Rob something. I don't remember exactly his name. He says, I'm a Peace Corps worker. I said, what's a Peace Corps? So he says, we are Americans. We were working here on the border farms or something, and I'd been traveling on a dirt road and saw the emblem from a BMW motorcycle. My friend, who's another Peace Corps volunteer, has a BMW, and I thought it was him. In the accident, I came to check in the hospital and found you. He says, that's the good news. The bad news is they figure now you are healthy, they want to discharge you tomorrow. I said,
with all these injuries.
Yeah, and in the meantime, he tells me, watch out for the nurses. They discovered your passports. I had a few passports, and they said that these are all good. They would love to be married to me.
Free medical care.
Well, whatever. But so he says, but I tell you what we'll do. My wife and I decided we're going to take you to our home to let you recover. So I was in their house. The first day, a police car shows up, a truck actually, puts me in the back of the pickup truck, to give witness to what happened. They want the statement, and that's when I got the affidavit, and they told me all these things happened, and no translator, of course, and so.
Okay, where do I sign?
And then they took me back, and these people were really nice to me. They had they rented videos, cassette videos, and I watched movies for 3 weeks and so on. And
What
then
some guys will do for a
and
vacation.
then the hospitals that I run, one of the hospitals, did you show Lampang Hospital? Show them Lampang Hospital. Yeah, you showed that. Okay. Now, after that, I spent a few weeks in different hospitals, being ferried to Bangkok General and another hospital. And then I finally was brought back to an apartment that one of my students' parents had an office, or owned an office that was no longer used. And that was my place to stay in Bangkok. I slept on the floor there until they showed up. A truck shows up with my motorcycle in pieces in a crate and said, you know, you'll need this to get out of the country, because I had signed a bond that once I entered with my motorcycle, I had to leave with my motorcycle. I couldn't
so
leave
you
the
wouldn't
country.
resell it. Yeah.
Right. So I had to do that. And then I got a message to American Express. I had this insurance medevac, but they only would medevac me to the Philippines, the closest American hospital. I said, no, I don't want to be medevaced to the Philippines just yet. So then my friend called me from Singapore, and he says, you're coming to Singapore to the hospital, to St. Elizabeth, we'll take care of you. And before I knew it, I'm in the cardiac unit. Well, you know, do you know the theory of unintended consequences?
Yeah, but
Okay,
how
so
did that work here?
well, here it worked very interestingly. My friend had a girlfriend who was a married woman who was a nurse at this hospital, and he decided I needed to be at this hospital so he could come and visit me and also see his girlfriend. So that's how I ended up in Singapore for 2 weeks in a hospital, and finally I got medevaced to Hawaii. And we'll continue the story
It was
another
all
time.
for love.
These are the hospitals that I learned to love and appreciate, respect, and hope never to go back to it.
Really?
And so this is our story, the hospitals you learn to love. My guest over here, J. Fidell, been a pleasure. I hope you understand that this is all very serious, and it's given, delivered, and I expect a proper reaction in terms for the seriousness of the topic as well. Until next time, you've been watching Rafi Boritzer, Bio Briefings, and until next time, aloha.